Welcome to Dark Dreams.
Horrified Press. horrifiedpress.wordpress.com.
In Defense of Roger Herrings by Graham Masterton. Roger Herrings claimed he had fornicated with quality, but I had just ridden my Maltby Speedwind bicycle, fast as possible down the fast bits, and walking whenever there was a gradient. It was a summer hot enough to turn the roads to licorice, and the oak trees smudged into a haze, and the aroma of drying grass hurrying unexpectedly around the hedges as I pedaled, on my way to meet Miss Jessica Rowland, whom I had never fucked. Sad to say, mutter, but whom I would have been glad to. I was 19, and my father was freshly dead. He had fallen down the open hatch of a convoy ship from the Argentine, and cracked his skull open on a red, white, and blue slab of frozen meat. I loved him quite, but it was embarrassing for me. So I said he had been gored by a bull, which made my friends wince in horror rather than guffaw, and have to pretend that shock had temporarily unbalanced them. You see, so it was hard for me to separate fact from fiction. I could even imagine the blunt horn forcing a rude entrance into the gut, and blundering bloodily through that soft apparatus, in which so many a Guinness had been enjoyed, at the hairy beast, on warm country afternoons, when the sun shone dusty through engraved glass, and many a straw-streaked boot creaked, and voices now hummed their elegy for my dear, dead dad. And Roger Herrings, who was 25 of a day, but had 4F'd his way out of the army, and now in the summer of 1947 sat lazily in the heat, his white pigeon chest bared to the warbling air, said to me, "Then there was Judy, a peach, a peach. You should have seen her, all hot and sticky as a pot of marmalade. And I got in there like a pitchfork in a load of manure. Grumph!" The brill cream on his short black hair shone, and though somehow there was always the lurking envy which said no girl like Judy could bear that hair bobbing and weaving in her water-soft face, I knew that he'd done it, for he only told lies about drinking. When I rode off on my bicycle, Mr. Maltby Speedwind, standing in the saddle and heaving my weight onto each pedal, one after the other, I felt like a schoolboy virgin, and my life of solitary sins stretched behind me. Descendat super vos et maniat semper. And now I was on my way to meet Miss Jessica Rowland. Here's Group Captain Douglas Bader, the legless air ace, swooping down on Peenemünde in his Typhoon Angel 5 to Angel Leader Angel 5 to Angel Leader Bandits at 9 o'clock, and the whirling Messerschmitt trapped between my hairline sights. Ah, meow, karoom! Here she was, Jessica, standing in the tender ripples of afternoon summer, seen through the underwater of my memory. Miss Jessica Rowland, she of the pointy nose, and the high round forehead, and the long fairy hair that drifted and settled and rose, and floated around her like the restless seaweed on a distant shore, and tiny pointy breasts under red gingham, and large myopic eyes of blue, and lickable spindly legs, with ankle socks. 17, not a bomb had touched her, not a fiery plane had marred her. Through the death of my dad, she shone and shone and shone like a radiant beacon, rising from the misty waves of all my memories, so pure and purely, swelling the world with warmth and hope and direst love. To me, on my Maltby Speedwind. She had freckles and a habit of crinkling her nose that dissolved me each time into complete breathlessness. "You look boiled," she said. "Yes, it's scorching, isn't it?" I dismounted and slipped off my bicycle clips, like a man going into church. In secule seculorum. We'll have a faint background of organ music here, please. Bach's Prelude in G-flat major. I left my bicycle securely padlocked and we walked along the lane, my hand sweating into hers. "I've come to a decision," she said, and my heart peeled out of formation and spun toward the sea. "I've decided not to see you anymore." "Oh." And I rode and rode my Maltby Speedwind with my breath screaming in my throat, miles and miles and miles down the fast bits and the gradients and the corners and the curves, miles and miles and miles, and stopped on a hilltop that I did not know, silent and humid and unfamiliar, with metallic clouds sitting like eyebrows on the rounded Wiltshire hills. The telephone. Press button A. "Jessica, it's me. Can I see you?" "I've told you. I've decided not to see you anymore." "Jessica, I love you. But I don't love you. It's no good. I just think it's silly going on." "But you haven't even tried to love me. I still like you as a friend." "What good is that to me? Jessica, you don't understand. I love you." And then the coppers were used up, and she dwindled away down the line from this fraught and lonely phone box, where I now stood caged in red, a smaller figure than ever before, as if seen from an aeroplane from a great distance, farther and farther away until I was no longer visible to the human eye, and you'd have to strain to see me through a telescope. I cried for a while, and then I was 20, and the bank opened its doors for me. It was winter. I sat behind the counter, caged in bronze. A high, pedantic clock paced out my afternoon, with drawer full of money on my left, and a sugar scoop on my right to shovel it out with. £1,000 in one drawer, in various denominations, large, white, crinkly fivers, big enough to wrap a haddock in, green pounds, brown 10 shillings, and coins with edges you could strike a match on. I stole none of it. I saved up my salary. I saved £10, and then I carried it, and my virginity, to the West End, on the tumbril of my sadness, to be weaned into corruption. "Excuse me." Suspicious young eyes and sooty makeup turn my way. It's a dour afternoon in Wardour Street, with the sky like corroded copper. A few cold spots of rain, and a man hurries like Dracula in black umbrella and midnight coat. "What'd want, Dux?" "I'm terribly sorry. I hope you don't get the wrong idea, but are you—" £2 10 a frau, fiver all night." Cheaper than I thought. That will leave me £5 for new bicycle tires, and perhaps even a new saddle. Yes, that seems to be all right." "What does? £2 10 a frau, or fiver all night?" I think the £2 10 will do." Jessica led the way into the orchard. The apples were dropping. She melted to the ground like honey sliding from a slice of fresh bread, her arms already outstretched to take me into their sweet caress, and the breeze around my bare direction and around her loins joined us already. though there were frail panties to negotiate, and finally her little cries and whimpers, and her teeth biting my ear. Stebbings saw you coming out of a house of ill repute. I beg your pardon, sir? Stebbings saw you leaving the premises of a prostitute. Oh. I could only stare at the watch chain that held him together, and not at the mottled face, broad as the sun and white-whiskered, with terrifying eyes one could easily fall into and dwindle away forever. The bank is a moral bank. I am responsible to your parents until you come of age, not only for your business welfare, but for your moral welfare. I shall have to write to your father. My father is dead, sir. Oh. He was gored by a bull, sir, and died. I am sorry to hear that. Then I must write to your mother. You understand that I do not wish to upset her, but she must know of this. Yes, I understand, sir. Good. You may return to your work. That afternoon I took £1,000 out of my cash drawer. Then I walked out of the bank and into the street. Then I walked back into the bank and put it all back. Then I got a letter from my mother on the prickly front doormat at my diggings, with their horrendous wallpaper and eternal lingering odors of fried eggs and stale genitals. It amounted, this letter, in its spidery pale blue writing, to excommunication. In nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. You filthy creature. What would your dear father have thought of you? But my dear father was too busy lying crushed in Bath Cemetery, with the impression of chilled sirloin on his unsmiling face. Down, down the suburban streets on my Maltby Speedwind. Silver lamp standards erect on both sides, 1,000 metal erections to herald the arrival of my erotic self, and a strange, vacant second when life diminished from me, and I was lying with skinned knees in the road, and my bicycle wheel ran tick, 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 tick on its side. Are you all right? Yes, I think so. I've torn my trousers. Why don't you come inside for a moment? I can put some iodine on that. Yes, thank you, I think I will. Do you think I might have a cup of tea? Of course. Sit down here and I'll get you one. Group Captain Douglas Bader, the wounded air ace, lies in a German POW camp. Blood spattering the floor. Ah, das English Schweinhund. Sind Sie krank? Was möchten Sie her? What room is this? A warm room, with large chairs well covered in gold braid, and a fat walnut drinks cabinet in the corner, chunky with bottles of gin and scotch and brandy, and a painting of a country scene, its surface glossy and wet with cracks. Original. Then the woman returns with iodine in a brown-ribbed bottle and a towel, and a small enamel basin of water. Raise your trouser leg. Like this? That's right. My goodness, what a graze. It was a good thing I saw you. You just went straight over the handlebars. Ignominious for the son of a man gored by a bull. She squats down, dabbing with orange-stained cotton wool. Her face is young, 30 perhaps, and slightly elfin, as if her great-great-grandmother was a halfling. And my eyes furtively descend to her skirt, stretched tightly across her thighs, and deeper inside a long, enthralled look at slender legs sheathed in shiny brown nylon, the white flesh held fast in suspender clips, and a bulge of white panties, full as a butter muslin of blackberries. "What's this?" she says unexpectedly, and shocks me out of my seat by laying a calm hand on my hardened tool under my trousers. "What's made you like this?" And as I sit, the strange invalid, one trouser leg rolled up like a novitiate mason, her fingers unwork the tin buttons of my fly, and out it rises into the expensive room, so naked a piece of meatwork, and all the fittings so well polished. My prick beholds an original oil. Then she, with her cotton dress high lifted, a Lautrec woman at the bath, straddles and spraddles my chair, so that we're coupling, by God, and my true virginity is lost not to the thunder of symphonies, as I had once imagined it would be, but to the quiet, amused squeaks of flesh on flesh, and whispers and murmurs of peculiar delight. And I ride my Maltby Speedwind, a chariot, not to the bank today, but to the station, where I board a westbound train, to stand in the sibilant graveyard over the grave of my father, whose ghost, which is me, has been laid at last.
The moon is full and it is dripping with blood.
Now comes Blood Moon Rising magazine.
Original fiction,
Creature features,
nightmarish artwork.
interviews, and other original horror.
Visit bloodmoonrisingmagazine.com and join our rising legion.
Here we are with Eric J. Guignard, editor, writer. Been a nominee also lately for Dark Tales of Lost Civilization. Man, I can't even pronounce it.
Civilizations.
Thank you.
Absolute honor to receive a nomination on my first anthology effort. Very exciting.
Yeah, you had a lot of big names too, didn't you?
I had a couple big names in that first anthology, and then another anthology that I recently released a few months ago had some additional names. And that's kind of the wonderful thing about being an editor, is that you have an opportunity to work with your inspirations, people that you've read and you've admired and looked up to, and you have an opportunity to maybe bring some work to them and kind of help pursue their career. And at the same time, you just have the benefit of knowing that they've put together and written something special just for you, for your own efforts.
Wow, yeah. I mean, it sounded interesting. I haven't read it yet. I want to. You had Joe Lansdale, didn't you, in this?
Absolutely, yeah. That was one of the highlights of that book. An absolute thrill that myself, really having no prior credits, no credibility, no relationships, and I kind of just blindly reached out to him, and we worked out an agreement that he wrote a story for me that was it was a fantastic story. And in fact, Paula Grant just accepted it for her own collection of the year's best horror and dark fantasy stories. So definitely speaks volumes about his talent.
Oh yeah. I mean, who else did you have in it though?
I had a gentleman named David Tollerman, who is kind of on the verge of going from the indie presses to mass market. He's been in several of the year's best anthologies, and somebody that I was familiar with from previous publications. I had a couple of other pretty well-known indie authors that are regularly putting out quality fiction in some of the top science fiction, horror, dark fantasy publications. Jamie Lackey, Aaron J. French, a local Caltech professor who was just a fascinating individual, Jonathan Voss Post, who's literally a rocket scientist and wrote just the strangest piece about physics and chemistry and quantum calculations about an alternate explanation for kind of the rise of civilization.
Oh, that's cool. That sounds like a really good plot.
Yeah, it was. I've had such mixed reactions from it. You know, some people just hate it because it really is very academic, and some people from the technical side love it. I was one of those that just love it. I mean, the more technical a horror story or a science fiction story to me is, I mean, that's what it brings out the science in the fiction, and it just kind of makes it more. It just resonates more.
Yeah.
The possibilities are there.
Yeah. I guess you got a point there. Well, let me ask you also. You did After Death. Sorry, I know you hear the paper rattling and everything. But I wanted to make sure I got everything right before I ask you these questions.
Yes.
So, well, before we get into After Death, what was the inspiration behind doing that that collection of stories?
So the question is the inspiration for After Death or for Dark Tales of Lost Civilizations?
Well, let's do Dark Tales first.
Okay. Actually, I could pretty much answer that for both of those. Really, the inspiration for both of those are just things that have fascinated me my entire life. I mean, when I look back at my childhood, you think about what are the mysteries around you. I mean, those are ideas that just really trigger the recesses of your imagination about, not just cowboys and Indians and Native Americans, but really the story of Atlantis. What became of prior civilizations? What other cultures have existed in the world that are nothing but relics and stories that are passed down now? What are alternate ideas for the rise and fall of empires, and even going beyond that, the possibility of life and existence on other planets, outside of our own known realities. And then piggybacking on that, for the After Death anthology, that anthology is suggestions and ideas of literally what should happen after we die. And likewise, not in a morbid sense, but I think that that's something that everybody has contemplated over their life, and I know I have throughout my childhood, just simply thinking in between watching movies or reading books, what's going to happen to us. I was raised in a very traditional religious household, so of course that's always been a primary view of mine, is the philosophy of heaven and hell. But there's so many different cultural interpretations, and that's what I wanted to bring to this book, is nothing that's preaching that one theology is better than another, but really an exploration of ideas like Valhalla and the Viking hereafter and Greek lore and kind of stories of reincarnation and stories of karma, and not even just what happens to humans after they die, but maybe what happens to animals and other life forms. I really wanted to kind of get a very broad idea from authors all around the world.
Right. That sounds, man, that's pretty deep.
Thanks.
It's great for a collection of stories, though. That's true. I was also... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. I just want to mention, I've always appreciated the traditional monster tropes, but I wanted to pursue maybe ideas that were a little bit more thought-provoking, while still promoting the dark fiction genre, but really stories that would resonate with the reader rather than just kind of the traditional, monster hacks up, damsel in distress and is saved by the adventuring conqueror.
Right. Well, we're all children of Richard Matheson, who just passed away yesterday. So.
Yeah, of course. God rest his soul. Is huge inspiration to just about everybody in this industry.
Well, what I was going to say was that not to bring up something bad, but it was unusual that I was looking you up, and I come across something that you told me, like 6 months ago, that you had a problem when you were putting your collection together, where somebody took offense to the Lost Civilization collection. You asked writers for stories or something. You put out the submissions, right?
Yes.
It was unusual. I didn't think I would find this posting, and what I read was very ignorant.
Yeah, I thought so, and and of course, for those listening, to clarify, it was just, a reference that I had not a full, a true cultural understanding, and I was coming from a racist background, which, of course, it's the furthest thing from the truth, and
Right.
unfortunately, that's, there's the blessing and the curse of the internet and the age of information where everything is out there, and really, no matter what you write, it's always going to be open to interpretation, and against your best efforts, somebody may just look at what you're doing in the wrong light, and it's just could have to do with their own personal experiences. There could be, there could have been malicious intent to it, although I read what was written about me, and I honestly think it was, somebody with a loud bullhorn that was regularly kind of making accusations against individuals. But, at the same time, I have to respect that, it is very possible, probable that I did offend somebody. And again, that was never my intent. But I'd look back at what I wrote and think that, in the future, how can I reword things just so that they're less prone to negativity like that? And it was really a good lesson to for future use, because people just write the most asinine things on the internet in just the heat of emotion, and things that you write, as you mentioned, you look back 6 months ago. Depending on what I told you, and you're able to look this up, stuff on the internet, it never goes away. We hear stories all the time about people that they regret. They hit the send button, and 5 minutes later they try to retract something that went out there into the cyber universe, and it's out there for the world to see. They can never take it back, and all you can do is apologize and try to justify it. And it's just that proverbial huge can of worms that once it's open, it's just everything it slithers out, and it's never going to go back. So yeah, again, it was hurtful, but if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And that was kind of my first experience with just getting internet lambasted by people I didn't know. But fortunately, it hasn't happened since then. And hopefully I try to continue kind of working on good projects and keep a positivity around me. And I get messaged periodically by people that they may have issue with something I've did or said, but if that's the nice thing about kind of messaging personally, is you have a chance to discuss your own kind of issues and philosophies. And most often, as long as you give a chance for somebody else to share their opinion, and you kind of you share your own opinion and work things out, find the halfway point.
Yeah. Well, it was just an odd coincidence, because I wasn't intentionally looking for it at all. I was just looking up your collection. I just wanted to make sure I had, everything in my mind that I was going to ask you about, and then I run across it. But like you said, though, when things like that happen, you most often get some people on your side that you normally probably wouldn't have had on your side.
Yeah, actually, I didn't. Part of me wanted. I didn't respond to anybody. I just let it be. I thought that responding, even if I try to kind of explain my intentions and give the most sincere apology, I just thought it would just kind of open the door for more people involved. But that was the first time I'd ever publicly kind of reached out to talk about a potential project, and that was the first response. So needless to say, it literally terrified me, because I thought, my God, stuff like this, is this the regular way of kind of pursuing writing? Am I just going to be my mailbox filled with hate mail? And I was just about done for it right then and there. Right. But yeah, again, I thought, live and let learn, and I moved forward. And
exactly. Well, your advice on a thing that happened with me with the podcast has really helped me out a whole lot.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, especially approaching people of certain stature. I hate to say stature, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, certain levels. I entirely know, because I approach individuals, periodically about working on projects, and everybody's different. There's just all manner of personalities, and I get rude responses back sometimes, and I file it away and just think, well, I'm not going to work with this person again, or even try to. But more often than not, you tend to get polite, even if somebody's not interested. Most people tend to kind of give you a polite nod and wish you the best of luck, and they may not be interested for reasons of time or money or any number of other things.
Exactly. Well, you know what? Speaking of the podcast, we had Moon over Anderson. Sorry, can't speak today. Moon Andersonville on the show, and also it was another one, Creature in the Crevice.
Yes.
Really good stories, especially Moon over Andersonville.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that.
Where was that actually published first?
That The Moon over Andersonville was published in I know it was a small indie publication. Gosh. Yeah, for the life of me, I cannot remember. I think it was one of the first things that I had ever written, and I submitted it to a small publication that they had no promotions, no marketing. They didn't do anything with it. They kind of published a book, and, I was just jumping up and down for joy because I was like, oh, my God, I actually got something published out there. And I think 3 months later, the company just went completely out of business or removed all of their titles. I kind of thought, well, at least I went through the experience of that. And I ended up resubmitting it to a best of anthology for the same publisher that put out my own anthologies. And got it reprinted in there, which was even more exciting because Mike Mignola, who's the artist for Hellboy, did the cover artwork for this anthology, and it was filled with just huge names in the industry: Jack Ketchum and Ramsey Campbell, and Rick Hatala, and Graham Masterton, and just a number of others. So, I definitely got a lot of although my first experience of the story, I think maybe, my mom read it and that was about it, but I ended up getting a lot more mileage out of it by the further reprint.
Well, that's great. I mean, were you a big history buff? Is that why you wrote that, or did you see something on television or read something that inspired it?
I've always been very interested in history, and I think that ties into my anthology, the Dark Tales of Lost Civilizations. But even more than that, I am a passionate enthusiast of genealogy, and I had my great grandfather was he was an inmate there at Andersonville.
Oh, wow.
And died as a prisoner of war. And kind of in my genealogy studies, I read the actual journals of inmates in these camps. And to me, reading horror stories where there's, cannibals and psychotic murderers and serial killers and vampires, they're scary. But when I read the journals of the actual people that lived for years in Andersonville, and they were literally eating dirt and mud just to survive, just my God, the atrocities that occurred in that camp. I never felt a true horror as far as reading that, and I thought in my mind, what people would just do absolutely anything in the world to escape conditions like that.
Ain't that something? I mean, that's why your story was so good too, because you had read those stories, firsthand, about real people and everything.
Yeah, definitely meant a lot. And, that was one of my first writing efforts, and I'm still very proud of that story. I particularly enjoy that one.
It was great. Let's see. Well, why don't we get into your cross-country trip on your bike? What made you want to do that?
Well, when I was just kind of out of my college years, I was, I started a career, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I happened to be chatting with one of my peers about life goals, and I've always been a proponent of kind of talking about goals and listing goals, and once you write down goals, it's something like 50% more likely to achieve them. And I sat down and I wrote basically my bucket list, and that was before it was kind of named a bucket list. It was more of just my things that I wanted to accomplish in my lifetime. And that was something that I had wrote down, that I wanted to ride my bicycle across the country. And it took me 7 or 8 years after listing it that I actually decided that the time had come to do it, before I settled down and started got too involved into a career and worked on a family. So it was a wonderful experience.
That's wild. I bet you saw all kinds of things on your.
Oh yeah, my God, I did. I mean, I've driven around the country and in a car, and it's always nice to travel, but of course you don't see the land the same way that you do when you're out there on a bicycle, or even more so on a foot. The nice thing about a bicycle is you get to travel a little bit further than walking. But being on a bike, I was really on all the back roads, having a chance. Typically not a person inside on most roads, out there in the deserts and kind of lowlands and swamps that I was going through. So it really gave a lot of time for personal insights, almost like a meditation while you're pedaling along.
I'll bet so. I mean, were you cataloging plots and stories as you were riding along?
I was not. Mark, I've actually only been writing for about the past 2.5 years. So back then, that was another thing. I still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I was real big into furniture design and woodworking construction, and that's what I was thinking about while I was riding along, was more of kind of woodworking ideas and craft ideas that I would do when I came back. And even outside of that, it was just a matter of just kind of trying to figure out what the true values were in life, and and then just sightseeing and hanging out and partying when I could.
Cool. Well, tell me about some of the people that you've met at these cons. I'm pretty sure I see your pictures you post on Facebook that you take with different writers. Are they most likely the ones that have influenced you to start doing this, or?
Absolutely. A lot of the, it's almost like collecting baseball cards, and I started collecting photos of, authors that I'm friends with or I've met. And again, only something I started doing really over the past 2 years. So, some of them, Joe Lansdale is a huge inspiration. Everything I read by him, I love to death. So, that's definitely one that's inspiring. Anne Rice is there. Robert McCammon, I met last year at the World Horror Convention, and I was familiar with his work, and I had read a couple of his short stories and 1 or 2 books. But after meeting with him and chatting with him, it kind of got me, reinterested in visiting his catalog. And my God, just all of a sudden, it's just, I can't read enough of him. And
right.
His writing is just beautiful. It's very, just his descriptive prose is breathtaking. And he has just a thorough grasp on kind of, on bringing out the entire spectrum of human emotion in his writing. So. And even besides that, just some of the lesser-known writers that I meet at these conventions, I myself am I'm really only kind of moving in the indie circles. So to talk with like-minded people who are in the same place that I am, or perhaps have those multiple professional publishing credits, but they're still willing to chat with me and give me advice. It's always very exciting and interesting to talk to anybody, about any like-minded person, about their own projects and their own passions. And, just enthusiasm breeds more enthusiasm, and leads to inspiration.
That's true. That's true. So you got to meet with some of the friends that you've met on Facebook as well, and people that you've had stories sent in to you, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Kind of
cool. That's really cool. Well, let's see. What else can we talk about there, Eric? Don't you have like a novella that's set to come out soon?
Yeah, I have a novella that is coming out through Journalstone Publishing that is in about 2.5 months, early September, called Baggage of Eternal Night. And the novella is part of a series called the Double Down series of books, and it's a throwback to the old, I believe it was the Ace books from the 1950s and 60s, where they would pair two authors together, and each author would write one standalone novella, and the authors would be essentially one established author and then one up-and-coming author. So interestingly, nice history to that is that that's where Dean Koontz got his start. He was considered an up-and-coming author, and these old Double Down books gave him his first beginnings. And he, of course, a massive, incredible blossoming career from there. So Journal Stone has brought the Double Down books back and has already lined up 5 of those pairings. So I was fortunate enough that a woman named Lisa Morton, who is the vice president of the Horror Writers Association, just one of the most prolific short story writers I know. She travels around the country giving interviews on. She's a subject matter expert on Halloween, and just her energy levels is amazing. And she wrote one novella, and she invited me to be a part of the project and allowed me. I was able to put together the other novella, and they're packaged together, and the cover artwork was done by a pretty famous illustrator named Alan Clark, who I just met a few weeks ago, and he had part of a art gallery showing there at the most recent horror convention, and just just amazing work, and really impressed. He has a huge following of people as well that admire his work.
Oh wow, that's great, man. And yeah, I do remember reading about the. Never had one, but I do remember reading, or I think I saw an interview with Dean Koontz talking about doing the double books. Is he one of the authors that started rewriting his old catalog? Isn't that something I think that's something I'd read? Has he went back and wrote a lot of his early stuff?
I don't know. You mean rewriting or republishing?
After it had been published like years ago, I guess in the 70s or whenever it was that he had them. But I thought that he had went back and like just changed complete plots and everything.
Huh. I haven't heard that, but it wouldn't surprise me, just based on the audience that he has and the publishings. I mean, everything that Dean Koontz writes essentially is going to get out there on the New York bestseller list, and I'm sure any number of major publishers would love periodically just to go back in his back catalog and kind of republish, rewrite, and title collections of work as the early work of Dean Koontz, and which is to me, it's always kind of interesting to look at an author's early work and how they're writing now, and to look at the progression of the quality of the writing and the progression of their style, and the journey they've taken.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, I mean, influences that you've had that started, and doesn't have to be horror or science fiction. I'm sure you've got many literary influences.
Yeah, oh, I'm so sorry, Mark. The first part of your question cut out a bit. Could you repeat that? Sure.
Who are some of the other influences that you had?
Some of the primary literary influences. I'm 37, and it's no surprise for my generation. Stephen King is lauded as a huge influence on most people that I know that are in my age range. And Stephen King was the first horror author that I read, and that was primarily because my father read Stephen King, and so he would pass down his books to me, and I started reading them back in 5th grade. I think I read Eyes of the Dragon was the first novel of his that I read, and after that, Tommyknockers and It, and started reading his short story collections, Skeleton Crew, and a couple of the others. And he opened my eyes to kind of the world of mature reading, and besides that, I also became familiar with the Borderlands anthologies by Tom Monteleone that came out in the 90s, and that kind of opened my eyes to additional horror authors and their collections of, some of the best kind of non-trope, expected horror stories, just pure imagination. That was, the first time I'd read such authors as, Joe Lansdale and Bentley Little and Poppy Z. Bright and a number of others. And that was my free time leisurely reading. And, in high school, I pursued all the traditional literary idols, which people I still read today, and I still love the action the old boys adventure of Jack London books, and I still think of George Orwell as one of the finest authors of modern traditional literature. John Steinbeck, those are. And I read everything by Dean Koontz as well going through high school. So those are some of the early names that kind of got me started. Although, again, I never particularly pursued writing, never thought of it was for me. I was more interested in art and illustration, but I loved reading. I just, I would devour books, and I would really literally read anything I could get my hands on.
That's cool. Do you still draw?
No, I don't. And I got a degree in art out of college, and unfortunately, it's just one of those things like going to the gym. You really have to practice it every day. In fact, it's the same as writing. It's something that you have to practice every day, and you get stronger and your skills improve. But once you stop doing it, you really kind of lose those skills pretty quickly, or your capacity for it becomes flab.
I agree with you, and I agree with you on what you were saying. We could probably spend the entire night talking about writers that we were influenced, or, bringing up writers. You're exactly right. It is like baseball cards,
Uh-huh.
You just start bringing up people, and all of a sudden, you have a conversation with somebody about Clive Barker, and then it leads into other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me and you could probably do that all night.
Yeah, really. Instead of comparing the earned run average, you talk about how many books they put out in a year and what awards that they earn for their stories and work.
the first time you read them, what books they first appeared in, and things like that. Were you a big Harlan Ellison fan?
I was not, and I've read his short stories in anthologies, and I've always enjoyed what he's read, and I recognize him as an immense talent. But
Right.
He's just, unfortunately, I'm always embarrassed when individuals ask me if I've read somebody. That there's just never enough time in the world to read everybody that I want to, and I know he's one that I really should spend more time investing, just if nothing else, but just the character. I don't know of any author that I hear more just fascinating, entertaining, grumpy stories about, and it's really interesting.
Who else do you know living that is always mentioned in the same two words, his name and grumpy?
Yeah.
Ever met him?
His name and potential lawsuit.
Exactly. Have you ever met him?
No, I have not.
Oh, wow. He must not go to those conventions as much then.
He may not now. I know he did in his, I'm sure 15 years ago, I'm certain, he was a huge part of the Horror Writers Association, and I know a couple of the other writers groups, and, I'm guess he's scaled back a bit. I've only been attending the literary conventions for about a year and a half myself. So I hear the stories of people who have come and gone, and the hijinks that occurred years prior. Hopefully I love to meet authors, and again, kind of tying back into collecting photographs. And I am a huge autograph hound, and I love collecting autographs and meeting people. And he's one of those that I would love to meet at least once in my life. And like with Richard Matheson, unfortunately, the time has passed for him, but he was one of those individuals I would have done anything to at least have met one time, because I just hear nothing but wonderful things about, his good humor and his passion for the field and his own life stories.
Yeah, and there's one friend I have on Facebook. He attended a lecture of his. I want to say it was UCLA, but I'm not really sure. I can't remember. And he said that really Matheson didn't speak very much. It was his agent that did all the talking, which was I thought was funny.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
He always heard. Yeah, I heard he's very soft spoken and quiet, but yeah, interesting. The agent did the talking for him.
Right. I think it might have been. I'm not really sure. Because the only way I know this is by looking in the table of contents of their books. I think he shared the same agent that Stephen King did.
Oh.
I want to say it was Kirby McCall. Am I saying his name right? I'm not even sure of that.
Oh, it sounds good to me, and yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. They're, both of them just such, massive influences, and some of the bigger names may tend to share the powerful agents.
That's true. Well, you live in the right spot for autograph hounding. That's for sure.
Yeah, it is. Anytime an author's down here in Southern California, and of course there's so many of them that just live in Southern California as they're tied into the world of Hollywood. I try to jump out there and meet them, and nice to do the meet and greet thing, and try to build up the networking opportunities. It's I look at it. I spend as much time as I can now going to the conventions and meeting people, because I believe in building a solid foundation of support. And of course, I don't expect the bigger names to really give me two glances, but hopefully the more times I run into people, then that's how you build up friendships. And the nice thing with social media is you have that opportunity as well, but it's a much harder game to play if you're just on chatting with people via Facebook and Twitter versus having those conversations in person with individuals. It just it means a lot more to carry on a conversation face to face.
That's true, absolutely. Well, I tell you, I appreciate you being a good friend to both podcasts, and you did a review of Blackout City. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate you putting out quality work. I enjoy everything your efforts.
My work is not exactly quality, but
I beg to differ.
The other writers were really good, and of course your stories that appeared early on, I think that helped get people to listen to the program. I mean, I'm not saying that it's a big time thing, but I think your stories. And when I sent Moon over Andersonville to Corey Graham, was the one who narrated it, and he sent me a message back immediately and said, "Wow, this is just great." He said, "I hope this guy writes novels." And I said, "Oh, I'm pretty sure he's got several in his drawer, and he's just waiting to get them to the right publisher."
Oh man, that really warms my heart to hear. Of course, that's the hard thing with you being an indie author and putting stories out. It's half the battle is actually getting accepted into a publication, be it an anthology or a magazine or a podcast, and kind of the other half is trying to hear any sort of a feedback. Because, again, in publications like that, you share the table of contents with a number of other individuals, and, oftentimes it's, maybe just friends or family that happen to remark that they had read, such and such a story, and they particularly enjoyed it. So, yeah, hearing any sort of feedback is, it's always very, it's reassuring that I'm on the right track.
Yeah, well, you're definitely on the right track, and the books that you've put out are very interesting, especially the collections. Do you have any more on the way?
I'm not planning on any additional anthologies at the moment. I did the two anthologies that I did. I basically did them back to back, and they were incredible learning experiences. And I recommend anybody who wants to pursue this industry and is looking for an educational opportunity to try putting together an anthology. I mean, essentially, I did on both of those anthologies, I did everything, absolutely everything myself. It was completely my concept. I learned the marketing side of it. I had to put together my own contracts with writers. So I touched on the legalities of it, working with negotiations, and of course doing I wrote personal letters to every submitter, giving feedback, and it helped me to kind of read hundreds and hundreds of stories and realize, my God, I'm reading the same, most of them are the same 10 stories over and over again. People tend to share the same ideas, and I suddenly realized, gee, the stories I'm writing, I fall in the same category as these stories I'm rejecting solely on the effort that it's not original. And it kind of opened my mind that, the first, every time I want to sit down to write a new idea, the first couple ideas that I have, I should throw them out and, just kind of keep working away on something that's truly unique and hopefully different. But yeah, again, the anthologies, it really gave me a chance to learn the industry from the editor's point of view and also from the publisher's point of view.
Right. Well, let me ask you about the whole rejection and acceptance thing that was going on. I've asked Joe Clifford, his editor at Flash Fiction Offensive, and Frank Larnard, who is putting together the Strange Critters collection, and I asked them both, is it hard to do rejections, or was it just completely, just professional? Did it bother you to reject some people, and others I'm sure it didn't, but that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, the answer is really yes to both of your, kind of suggestions. So sometimes it doesn't mean a thing, and it's purely just, it's a business decision that, story is, it's not going to fit the particular anthology. Although I always try to stress the fact that, I'm simply one point of view, and 100 other people could read that story that I rejected and just think it's the greatest story ever written in the history of literature. That's the thing about writing, is you're never going to please anybody. But, on the other hand, it was an incredible emotional journey. And it was heart-wrenching for some of the stories that, I had to reject, because there were, some of the stories for both of the anthologies, some of the stories that I received and I read were really technically masterful stories. And they would have done a justice to any publication, but they may not have quite have fit the overall tone that I was trying to establish for my anthologies. So that's another thing. If you've ever listened to an album of mixed music, you can't have one song that's Alice Cooper and then the next song that comes after is Beethoven, and the next song that comes after that is, Eazy-E and NWA. You kind of want to have a similar tone of artists, so it gives a natural progression and a flow to what you're listening to, and it kind of keeps you in the mood, and you know what to expect for the next story. So, unfortunately, you get stories that are the outliers, and no matter how good they are, they're the pink elephant story in the book, and maybe I couldn't accept it for that reason, or
right,
it may have been other reasons besides that.
Right. Well, that makes sense, and how you just put that, it really makes a lot of sense to me. And I've learned over the past, I don't know, year and a half that, okay, so somebody don't like that one, I'll just send it somewhere else. And
Yep.
You're right. Just because it don't fit there, don't mean it doesn't fit anywhere else.
You know what? That's it exactly. Every rejection is an opportunity for improvement.
That's true, too. Did you ever hear the story that Richard Matheson had, like, I don't want to say a trunk, but and I might be wrong. I thought I'd read this. He had a whole book of stories that had been rejected just once, and he never sent it anywhere, ever.
Well, huh. I've never heard that story before. It's surprise. It wouldn't surprise me for most people, but of course, with his accomplishments, I would imagine he might have a little bit more faith in his ability that he would send it elsewhere. But,
maybe it was because he, had such early successes. You know what I mean? And I think one of the very first stories he ever sent off got accepted by the science fiction and fantasy magazine just like that. It was no big problem. And then from then on, I think it kept progressing. And then I guess he might have had, I wouldn't say a lull, but, just here and there. Well, this was, he probably took it to heart that, well, it was probably crap, so I just won't send it anymore.
Interesting. Well, I guess that's the problem with fast success. Not that it occurred for Matheson, of course, but for anybody that they find immediate success, they haven't built up that armor that it takes to kind of understand the rejection process and kind of sludge through the mud. So once you hit it big, and then you have the fall thereafter, you may sting just that much more.
True. Well, Eric, I appreciate you coming by and giving the interview, and, well, more like a conversation. I hate saying interview, but
conversation is good.
I really appreciate it, and we're going to have you on here again. That's for sure. And
well, thanks, Mark. Anytime. I absolutely appreciate you reaching out to me and thinking anything that I have to say is worth any value at all.
Oh, no, most definitely you do. And I think if we're still doing this thing, around September when your book comes out, we'll definitely do this.
That sounds like a plan.
Have you talk about everything else? I'm sure you'll be at some more conventions coming up. Well, before we go, I do want to ask you this. Could it help someone's career by being in the HWA or any of the other associations, or is it just, somewhere to go hang out and, talk, like you said, talk to like-minded people?
You know what? I've been asked this question before, and I tell people that it's pretty much like anything else in life. You're going to get out of it what you put into it.
Right.
And in my personal experiences, I mean, I've had a huge amount of opportunity from kind of working with people who are editors and publishers, and even the ability to talk to agents in large New York publishing houses that you wouldn't have outside of the association. Being part of a larger organization gives you kind of the credibility and the backing of the name. In addition to that, there's an immense amount of resources that are made available to aspiring authors, such as myself, more opportunity to to speak with book reviewers, to look at your work. They have a mentorship program where I was blessed to be partnered by a very successful author named Weston Oakes.
Yeah. I know who he is, yeah.
Yeah. If you know him, I mean, he's oh my God, he's just an intense, amazing individual who has the most, there are the craziest life stories, and he's back in Afghanistan right now. He's still in the military, and
didn't know that part.
Yeah, he's working on his books and his stories back there while still in duty, and I'm fortunate enough to count him as my official HWA mentor, and he's somebody that I've been able to talk back and forth with about works that I've had in progress, and to get advice, and I think that's huge to be able to call upon his experience.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, I didn't know that about him. I guess I didn't read that close into his biography. I just know about some of the stories that have popped up on podcasts I've listened to. Special Tales of Terrify had a couple of his on there, and then I had a couple of stories that were in other anthologies, but I didn't know that he was in the military.
Yeah, if you'll notice, a lot of his stories have a military background to them, and that's he calls upon his experience, and he's able to write in a very technical voice for his stories that they tend to have soldiers or some of the military kind of backing as protagonists.
Wow, that's great. All right, Eric, thank you for coming by. I really appreciate it. It was a great talk. We won't say interview. It was a great talk.
Hey, it was a great chat. I can imagine us sitting on the rocking chairs on the porch with a cold glass of lemonade.
Oh, heck, well, you're definitely going to need it in this heat. It's off a lot here, but I'm sure you've got a ways to go to cool off there.
Yeah, it's sweltering out here. I live on, the eastern side of Los Angeles, bordering on the Mojave Desert, so the temperature it gets up. That's for sure. But yeah, again, Mark, I truly, truly appreciate your time. Your interest in me, and of course, reaching out to me. Thank you so much.
I say every house in America should have an electric chair. And every man just once in his life should sit in it, just so that he can feel the power of millions of gallons of electricity flow through his veins. I got an electric chair, that's all I need. You get an electric chair, Sheldon, you don't have to worry about the audience. You get an electric chair, you can tell them anything you want, as long as it's real. You get yourself an electric chair and they'll sit there all night long. Kind of a funny idea, sitting in an electric chair and doing a show. Or think of the therapeutic value of an electric chair and all the money it is. Yes, an electric chair in every home.
The Electric Chair, a show about horror. ElectricChairShow.com.
An electric chair. Wow.